Hello, this is lesson 2.1, day 2, graphing on a number line. I want you to write this on the top of your paper, and then also, before we begin, I want you to copy these fraction equivalents. So these are actually common fractions that are often changed into decimals, and you should really be comfortable with knowing the equivalent fraction and decimals in this list because they're easy and they're common and you're going to see them often. So pause the video so you can copy this down, and then when you're ready to continue, press play. Please pause now. Okay, so we're going to start off looking at the chart, and the first thing that you see at the chart are the fourths. Okay, sometimes we call them quarters. So on the side, you'll notice that I've written here this, we can call this 1/4 or 1/4. So if you think of money, 1/4 is 0.25, and you might want to go ahead and write this note on the side of this fraction. And then 1/2, that a lot of you guys already know that's 0.5. But then we have the fourths again, 3/4. We know that we can also call that 3/4. So if you think about money, 3/4 is 75 cents. So 3/4 is 0.75. So now we have the fifths, which is 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, and 0.8. Those are the fifths. And then these are also easy here. These are the tenths, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc. That'll go all the way to, 9/10, which is 0.9. And then we have, these also are very common, the thirds. 1/3 is 0.3 repeating, and 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. Now what I would like for you to do is to draw a line underneath that table, all right, and then I want you to copy what you see on your screen. Please pause the video to do so, and then when you're ready to continue, press play. Please pause now. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to graph decimals and fractions on the number line. And the easiest way to do that is to make each decimal make each fraction a decimal. So for number 1, when you look at the first number, that's already a decimal, 2.1. So we're going to leave that alone. But here, -6/10, that was up in our chart, okay? So 6/10 we know is 0.6. So -6/10 we're going to say is -0.6. So we're going to write it as that. So I'll just put here negative in my other color. So please do this with your other color. That's -0.6. All right, and I'll just put a little arrow. Okay, and then -3/4, that's 3/4, and that's going to be -0.75. So I'm going to put that here, -0.75, and I'll draw an arrow to that so I know that that goes there. And then the last one is 2 1/3. So remember that 1/3 is on our chart. 1/3 is right here. You can see it at the top of your screen. It's 0.3 repeating, so 2 1/3 is 2.3 repeating. So I'm going to write that decimal up above it or near it, 2.3, and then with a bar over it. Okay, so I'll draw an arrow to that. Okay, now we can go ahead and plot our points. So for the first decimal, we have 2.1. Okay, here's 2 and here's 2.5. So 2.1 is 1/5 of the way there. So I'm going to put a dot with my red pen. Okay, and then I'm going to label it 2.1. Okay, so that's my first number. And then we have the next one, which is -0.6. Okay, so that's going to be on the negative side, and -0.5 is this right here, -0.5. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and mark that at the bottom on the number line. This is -0.5. All right, so then -0.6, remember the number line on the negative sign goes backwards in reverse, so -0.6 is just 1/5 to the left of -0.5. So we're going to go ahead with my red pen. I'm going to mark it, okay, right here, right to the left of -0.5, and I'm going to label it -0.6. And then -0.75, okay, remember we're still on the negative side. It's going to be further to the left. It's getting closer to 1, so it's 3/4 of the way. So it's going to be about here. Okay, it's going to get a little crowded soon. Here we go. Try that. And that's going to be -0.75. Okay, and then the last one is 2.3 repeating. Okay, 2.3 repeating, we can estimate that 0.3 repeating is about 2.3. We know this is 2.1, and we know this is 2.5. So 2.3 is going to be to the right of 2.1. So I'm going to put my dot right about there as an estimate. Okay, and then I'll put 2.3. All right, so that's my order then of my decimals. We'll go 0.75, 0.6, or negative 0.75, negative 0.6, 2.1, and 2.3. And now what I want you to do is write these in order from least to greatest. So here that negative 0.75, I converted it back to its original form, so it's negative 3/4. And the negative 0.6 is the negative 6/10. And then comes the 2.1, and the last one is 2.3 repeating. Okay, so I converted that to 2 1/3. Okay, so now let's take a look at problem number 2. So we're going to convert all of the fractions and mixed numbers into decimals. So our first mixed number, let's make that a decimal. And if you look at your chart, 1/5 is 0.2. So negative 1 1/5 is going to be negative 1.2. Okay, so that's this one. And then then positive 0.25, that's already a decimal. We can leave that alone. And then we have 1/5, and that's going to be 0.5. So I'll just put, not 0.5, 0.2. And we'll put an arrow to that. And then the last one is negative 1.75, and that's already a decimal. Great, we get to leave that alone. So now we're going to put these on the number line. So for negative 1.2, okay, so this is 0. This is not quite the best drawing. It should be halfway between 0 and 1. This is negative 0.5. This is 1. This is negative 1.5. So negative 1.2 is in between here. It's going to be negative 1, and then negative 1.1, negative 1.2, negative 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. Okay, so with my red pen, I'm going to go ahead and estimate negative 1.2 is going to be close to negative 1, and then I'll just write negative 1.2 there. Okay, and now we have positive 0.25. Okay, and we know that 0.25 is 1/4 of the way, so it's between 0 and 1, so this is half. So then it's 1/4, which is 1/2 of half, so it's right here. So we'll put our dot there, and we'll label that 0.25. Okay, so there we go. And then we have our next number, which is 1/5. Oh, this is where it gets really close. Okay, so 1/5 is actually 0.2. Okay, and if we wanted to, we could add a 0 at the end of 0.2. All right, and it's 0.20, which means that if you look at our number line, we've already labeled 0.25. So 0.20 is like right next to that. So I got to really squeeze that in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put another dot there. All right, and then I'll put here 0.2. Okay, that is this one right here. All right, and then our last one is negative 1.75. So negative 1.75, if you look over here, here's negative 1, here's negative 1.5, here's negative 2, because we're going in reverse order. So negative 1.75 is like in the middle of negative 1.5 and negative 2. So we'll put our dot right there, and we'll label it negative 1.75. All right, and so then here's our order from least to greatest. And here I rewrote the ones that were originally mixed numbers or fractions. I rewrote them in their fraction form. So the first one, the smallest is negative 1.75, then negative 1 1/5, and then 1/5, and 0.25 is last. And that's all for your notes. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.